Chapter 7. A magazine writer who should have known better once put at the head of a story of my work and methods the title, Burbank versus Nature. I can't remember anything that made me quite so hot under the collar as that caption. It was something like writing a treatise called Wilbur and Orville Wright versus the Law of Gravitation. Because there never was a man lived on this planet who had more respect for nature, who studied her rules and her system more diligently, nor whose work depended more on an understanding application of her laws. The newspaper headline writers long ago dubbed me the plant wizard, and perhaps a good deal of nonsense has been written at one time or another along that general line. There was nothing mysterious, occult, magic, or metaphysical about my work, not in the slightest degree. I was nature's pupil. I did manage to find ways to speed up her results, but wherever one of my experiments succeeded, it was because I followed the rules. And where one failed, 9 chances in 10, it was because I overlooked some law or encountered a new section I hadn't committed to memory before. Going to school to nature from my earliest days, I learned, first of all, that it was possible to direct the habits and tendencies of plants toward a greater usefulness and delight for mankind, and also to release in them potentialities that were desirable from man's viewpoint. I have surprised many people by finding a striking parallel between plant and animal life. Many have thought I was speaking figuratively when I have compared the education of plants to the education of children, and the other way about, have said that we can learn how to teach our children to their best advantage by observing carefully the laws nature lays down for the development of plants and plant life. There is, of course, a sensational similarity between the course of every kind and degree of life. Fundamentally, the laws governing cells, or even crystals, are the same as those governing plant life, animal life, human life. All cells are made up of protoplasm, which, in turn, is made up, as I have said before, of a little contribution from everything in nature. How is it possible, then, that these cells, apparently of the same material and constituent elements, may grow into a flea or a buzzard, a crane or a horse, a pansy or a redwood tree, a bit of living scum on a stagnant stream, or a beautiful child? Well, a good figure there is the alphabet. There are 26 letters, and only part of them extensively used. Yet there are something like 500,000 terms or words made up of those few letters, a handful. How? By different combinations. That is all. Some of the combinations are as violently and wildly different as a toadstool and a lion are different. The first word in my dictionary is abec, and the last is zyxoma. Other words have a great similarity: benediction, benefaction, benefit, and benevolent, for example. Just a different train of cars, in each case, but all headed generally in the same direction. So, in living things, many of the organisms made up of cells have so much in common that we group them together as distinct families, such as the human family, with white men and red men and black men, Saxons and Latins, and Negroes and Chinese, but all of them with eyes and ears and mouths and legs and arms, walking erect, and being given the power to feel and reason to think both backwards and forwards, and able to use their thumbs, which, if you will consider it a minute, you will find is one of the most remarkable differences between man and the other animals, and the one that makes possible most of man's handiwork, and the lack of which prevents the beasts from doing more than the most elemental construction work. The thing that binds all life together, then, is the cell from which all life springs, and of which all life is made of. You cannot study plants without learning something about them, nor study men without getting ideas about animals and fish and plants. Comparatively, few scientists speak in terms intelligible to the layman. They are specialists, concerned with some particular phase or form of life, or with determining laws governing particular activities, developments, or manifestations of life. The naturalist, on the other hand, no matter how scientific, makes himself understood by all because he deals with a manifestation of life in which all are interested, and the language of which all the world speaks. Plants and animals, forests and mountains, flowers and children, are to be studied by anyone. The naturalist only adds to the layman's understanding a more extensive knowledge of the scientific basis for those phenomena, actions and reactions, habits and tendencies, mysteries and marvels, in which we are all interested and with which we are all more or less acquainted. I am hoping that I will, therefore, be able to make myself as clear in these papers as though I were writing of salesmanship or how to drive an automobile. I want to talk the language of every day. In that tongue, let us consider for a little this subject of going to school to nature. I have told in an earlier chapter of how my first helpful contact with nature was when I came on a green spot of lush vegetation in the middle of a timber piece in New England in the dead of winter. That showed me that nature had a provision by which plants could adjust themselves to an unusual or changed environment, and could not only thrive, but could pass on to succeeding generations this acquired power. In my earlier days as a truck gardener in Lunenburg, I had forced corn to early harvest by planting the seed in hotbeds and crowding into the growing plants. When it was removed to the field, the food I knew it needed. This showed me that plants were amenable to improvement and speeding up, or to any other desired development, by the process of catering to their needs, by using the intelligence of man to take advantage of the general laws of life. Those are examples of the lessons I learned in my chosen school very early. They were merely a suggestion of the infinite storehouse of information and knowledge nature has for her children. As I went on with my work, instead of finding out everything and taking my degree and settling back with the feeling that I knew all that nature had to teach, I discovered that everything I learned opened up new avenues for my ignorance, that every fact had a whole family of cousin facts around it. I began with the cell, the fundamental unit of life. It was apparent from all I saw that the cell was influenced by environment, that those influences, if they persisted long enough, repetition, entered into the heredity, and that this heredity was the factor I had most to deal with in training plants to bend themselves to man's greater good. Because it was the strongest factor and the deepest rooted, it was the one it had taken nature, generations, and maybe centuries or ages to fix. And there was going to be no teaching these old dogs of the vegetable world the new tricks I had in mind for them to perform unless I used diligence, patience, and a knowledge of nature's own processes. In the potato, I had a striking lesson of the amazing variations that can come suddenly and without any apparent explanation in the midst of the life of a common, unornamental, unsensational, everyday plant. I had proved that those variations could, by selection, be weeded out until the best was obtained. In other experiments, numerous and varied, I went farther and demonstrated that variations could be induced by plants, by cross-fertilization. There was my starting point, the law that makes variations possible, and my ability to select from among the variations in order to get and fix the qualities desired. It is one thing to know how a mathematical problem, for instance, is to be worked, and another to gather, place, and align all of a large number of factors in order to be ready for the actual figuring. It was so with my beginning in plant breeding. I have never left off studying. I have never felt that I came anywhere near mastering my subject. The learning was the greatest pleasure of my life, and still is, because nature is not only a wise teacher, but she knows how to make her subjects fascinating, interesting, and full of marvel and beauty.